what's up, everybody? My name is Sean Vaughn, and welcome to Champions Material. As always, glad to be here. Thanks to all of you who tuned in to last week's episode. Appreciate the love, the feedback, everything. Continue to like, subscribe, and share, and let's see where this thing can go. Throughout all Champions Material podcasts, we'll be introducing the topics we'll be diving into up front. So as they're being discussed throughout the pod, it gives you, the listener, the opportunity to think, form your ideas, perspective, and if there's questions, thoughts, any feedback you want to submit, bring it. Shoot those over to us at champions.materialsv@gmail.com. We want them. It can only help grow this podcast and make it better. Now, the topic this week is Air Jordans. Got to be the shoes. We'll get into the shoes, but we're going to go beyond that. You know, the Air Jordans, particularly the ones that Mike actually played in, now retros, they went beyond just the basketball shoes, beyond just the style. They had a cultural impact. And it wasn't just, black and urban culture. Why? Why was that the case? They were dope shoes that came out before the Jordans, Converses among others. But it was something about them J's, man. It was just different. Now, with me today to discuss all things Air Jordans and other shoe lines, my guy, a sneaker historian. He's definitely an enthusiast. He knows his stuff from Stay Copping Kicks. That dude, Curtis. My man, Curtis Harvey, man. Welcome to Champions Material. Glad we was able to do this, brother.
What's up, Sean? Appreciate you having me, man. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's go ahead and highlight these topics we're going to discuss, and then let's get into it. The separator. What made the Air Jordans different from all the kicks that came out before them? What stood out? Michael Jeffrey Jordan. How much did Mike himself and his play on the court play a role in how you felt about the shoes? The impact. Air Jordans to this day has had an impact on fashion and style, regardless of background, race, anything. Why? And then top three. Of all the J's that have dropped over the years, if you could only pick three models, which ones make the cut for you? Myself and Curtis will tell you the ones that made our cut. So let's go ahead and get this thing started, man. The separator. I'm going to kick this off to you to get started, Kurt. In your view, what made Jordans different from all the other shoes that came out before them? What stood out about the Jordans to you?
Well, to me, Sean, it was the total package. From the design, the advertising, to Jordan himself. Jordan wasn't the first athlete with a signature shoe, as you mentioned, but no company before had put so much effort behind the design, the marketing for any player's shoe. When you think back to that time and the time before, I mean, we did have great players with signature shoes. Like you said, the Converse weapons. You think about the Converse Pros that Dr. J wore. You think about the Pumas that Walt Clyde Frazier wore. A lot of players had shoes, but usually the thing that made it, quote unquote, their shoe was just it being a slightly different color. Or it was just the fact that all of them wore the same shoe. Like, again, mentioning the weapon, think back to that commercial, Bird's got his green ones, Magic's got his yellow and purple ones, and then most of the other guys just had plain black and white ones. The Air Jordan was all Mike's. It was his name, his logo, and all that was revolutionary for the time. The shoe itself looked similar to contemporaries, but at the same time, it looked futuristic. There was a New York Times review at the time that referred to the shoe as looking like a moon boot. But just when you think about the way it was made, the paneling of the leather allowed for colorways and designs that weren't seen in the competitors' offerings. And even though it was based on, partial truths and misinformations, like with the whole band storyline about the Jordan 1, which really wasn't the Jordan 1, and then a legendary ad campaign that they used for it, it just made people more interested in the Jordan 1 and what this young guy from North Carolina was doing on Chicago basketball courts.
Absolutely, man. And I'm glad you brought up the band commercial. I still think that is the most, I wouldn't say the best sneaker commercial. I still think, that honor goes to Lil Penny and Penny Hardaway. But I would argue it's the most important because I feel like that commercial, you saw Mike, young Mike, bouncing that basketball. And they slowly got down to his shoes, and you saw some shoes that you had never seen before. And the fact that they put the, pretty much like the band, they pretty much like zeroed them out or blacked them out and said band. And they said, the NBA could stop Michael Jordan from wearing them, but they can't stop you. And I think that the shoe being different and then being presented to the masses like that, to the public like that, I think just only added to that campaign. And I think that really, basically just set off the whole idea of, okay, it's not just a basketball shoe that you see a player wearing. It's a statement. And I think we've had plenty of shoes and, shoe lines that we have seen from other athletes since then, where it's not just about the shoe, it's about what the statement, that the shoe is making and how you can internalize it as a consumer and what it can mean to you. So I thought that was a good point. Now, I did want to touch on something real quick. David Falk, MJ's agent. Before Michael Jordan, one of the things that I, picked up on reading Michael Jordan's book, Driven from Within, was before MJ, you had some charismatics, and known stars in the league. You mentioned Dr. J, Larry Magic, those two saved the league. You had Wilt and Bill Russell, Jerry West. But Michael Jordan was the first basketball player, and David Falk really keyed in on this, that he wanted to market as an individual athlete like you saw in boxing and in tennis. And of course, we saw Mike hit the shot against Georgetown as a freshman. We saw him in the Olympics, really, it was his coming out party. But no one knew at that time. It wasn't like he was the number one pick or just a can't miss like LeBron in '03. No one knew at the time that Michael was going to become Mike. So how important do you think it was that David Falk went to Nike and said, hey, if you want this guy, market him as his own man, not just as a player on the basketball team?
I mean, it was extremely important. I mean, you think about it, if, Mike was a big fan of Adidas. So if
That's
it
right.
hadn't been for
Yeah.
Falk, it hadn't been for his mom, he probably would have been an Adidas player. And more than likely, because as we mentioned earlier, the marketing that they did put behind him was like nothing before, he would have probably just had an average marketing campaign, and he would have just been wearing the Adidas basketball shoe at the time, whatever it was. And I'm sure it would have been popular, but I don't think it would have been gangbusters. I mean, you look at the fact that like there's so many players nowadays who have they have deep signature lines. They're like at their fifth or sixth, seventh shoe sometimes, and you don't even realize it. You don't even know what it is. Like I think about Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard is an amazing player, but I mean, I have a pair of some Dames, but for the most part, I've never really seen. I don't see people on the court with Dames. I don't see people in the street with Dames on. I did if I didn't know shoes like I do, I wouldn't know that he was on his sixth model. So you have that, and then of course when it comes to Mike, everything about him, it was just his play on the court, his personality, all those things were huge factors.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? You just took us right into our next topic, because I believe that no player in the history of the game before or since Mike did you have was it, how can I put this? His play on the court validated those shoes, particularly the first handful of models. I would say 1 through 4, and then by the time you got to the 5s and Phil got there, you knew that he was elevating his team to a championship team. But those first 4 in particular, specifically the 1s and the 3s, you looked at what Mike was doing on the court as a rookie, coming out there full blown, not NBA gear, not Jordan gear. You know what I mean? Dunking with warm ups on, with a gold chain. You see him, probably the most iconic dunk contest of all time, outside of Vince in 2000. That's just my personal opinion. Was the '88 dunk contest with him and Dominique, and you saw him taking off with the 3 zone. So it was not only the shoe, but it was how you were identifying the player.
Where Dominique got robbed.
Yeah. We'll have that debate another time. Now, Dominique was the man as well, but I think just identifying his play on the court and just his style and the fact that he was his own man. Because again, you really can't market anyone in any sport as an individual if they do not come across as their own man. And Mike certainly did that. So, do you okay, so how important was what you saw from Mike on the court. How important of a factor of that to you was how you liked the shoes and how you consumed the shoes? Or for you, was it just like, no, the shoes were dope, and Mike, what he was doing on the court was just a bonus?
I mean, it was a combination of the two. You know, when you think about it, when it comes to big moments, and you always remember where you were, you always remember the atmosphere of the time. And when you're talking about basketball and players, those moments always include the shoes that they were wearing. And that goes for any player. You know, I remember LeBron and his Soldier 10s for the block in 2016 against the Warriors, completing the 3-1 comeback. You know, I remember Penny Hardaway dropping 40 back to back against Miami in the phone posits. I remember Iverson with the step over in the answer four, or of course the killer crossover on Mike himself in the questions.
Mm.
Shoes are forever intertwined with those moments, especially in basketball. And when Mike came around, he came around at the perfect time. ESPN and, you know, the 24-hour news media were just reaching new levels. And because of that, you saw Mike's moments over and over and over. I mean, shoot, we still do. You know, that's part of the reason why so many people think Mike, you know, and you know, we'll get into this discussion later, but so many people think Mike is like undisputed greatest, undisputed, made more shots than anyone else, had more big games than anyone else. All these ideas that aren't actually true. Like, I mean, he had a number of great shots and everything like that, but there are other players who have done similar things. The difference was, you know, when media was coming alive, Mike was doing it. So, you know, I mean, I think back to when I was a kid. I mean, I had the Come Fly With Me video, I had the Michael Jordan Playground video, and I used to watch those videos every day. You know, so that's every day me watching him, you know, with the shot over Elo, him dropping 63 against the Celtics, him with the shrug against Drexler, you know. So you start building those memories in your head, and what comes with them is the shoes. And then Mike was always, you know, he was the coldest. You know, with him being from the country, having the background that he had, you know, being the loner, it just shaped him as a different type of dude. As you mentioned earlier with that dunk contest, you think about it, you know, he was wearing the Jordan 1s, he was wearing the all black color, or the black and red colorway. You know, instead of wearing the Chicago gear out there, he had on the Jordan jumpsuit, um, with the flight jacket and everything. Didn't take it off in the first round. Had the gold chains. Was doing crazy dunks, and because of Mike's size and athleticism, you know, it just made everything he did look effortless. You know, when you think about some of the other players out there, like especially in the dunk contest, bigger guys are always at a disadvantage because they're so tall, everything looks easy or looks too easy. You know, smaller guys, they have an advantage because everything looks a little harder, but because they're smaller, they don't have as much time in the air, or they can't do as much because they don't have the proper vertical. But, you know, with Mike being, you know, 6'6", around 200, he had this body type that just was the perfect size. I mean, most people say that's the perfect size for an NBA player in general. And then because he had his high vertical, and he just was able to it felt like he just was able to stay in the air a little bit longer, and he was so smooth with it, it just made him stand out even more.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm glad you brought up like specific moments. You talked about 63 on Bird when they were arguably the best team, one of the best teams of all time. You talked about, you know, other moments as well. And when we talk about how his play on the court can have an impact on how you feel about the shoes, I'll get into this a little bit more in detail later. But the Air Jordan 12, when I first saw them, they didn't do much for me. And they were coming, you know, behind arguably the most iconic silhouette model of all time, the 11s. And they weren't doing much. But as I was watching Jordan, you know, throughout that season, those shoes grew on me exponentially because that ended up becoming my favorite Jordan to watch. He's not, it wasn't him at his best. I think that was more probably either 92 or 93 personally. But
Oh yeah,
my
definitely 93.
yeah, Charles will tell you that. No, but in 97, when it wasn't just, and you talked about relatability, and the reason why the guy from 97, the flu game guy, the fifth ring guy, he stands out most to me. And the reason why I love that season the most is because when he was at his best, 90, 93, you admired what he was doing. But he was doing stuff that you couldn't really. You was like, okay, I'm not going to get out there. You can, pretend and you can dream you could, but it didn't really seem realistic. What he was doing by 97, when he was pretty much a two guard playing center, when he was giving it to you from the post, he was giving you fundamentals, he was giving you pump fakes. You know what I mean? He knew how to get to his spot. And once he got to his spot, there was nothing you can do. It wasn't that he was athletically superior to everybody back then. It was just hard work, time in the gym, and fundamentals just destroying you either way. So he was just as dominant, even though he wasn't the athlete that he had once
Definitely.
been. And back then, when you're watching, as you know, I was an '80s baby, so I'm watching, Sir Charles as his athleticism goes down. He wasn't quite the same player. I'm watching Jordan's contemporary, Clyde Drexler, as his athleticism when he got to Houston. By the time his athleticism started to kind of go down, he wasn't quite the same player. So I admired Jordan being able to reinvent himself after 18 months off and still be just as dominant, even though he wasn't the athlete that he had been. And watching him, do what he was doing in 97 in particular with those 12 zone, the con man game with Jeff Van Gundy, the Knicks coach talking about, Mike pretends to be friends with everybody so that when he gets him on the court, he can destroy him. And they're like, oh, that's just Mike, Mike took offense to that, dropped 51 on him. And that iconic final, it was a step back. It was a crossover and a fadeaway over, I think, Chris Childs and Patrick Ewing. And then him just yelling at Jeff, like, who's the con man now? That moment in those Jordan 12 taxis. Before that game, I was like, okay, they're cool. If I can, get some money together, I'll get them if I can find them. After that game, I had to have him. So it
Mm.
was his play and how he operated that really at times influenced how I felt about the shoes. So I'm glad you brought up those moments earlier. Let's take this into impact. The last time Michael Jordan was really Michael Jordan was 98. We know about the Wizards years and he was still an all-star caliber player, but he wasn't Mike. You know, the last time we saw Mike as we knew him was 98. So we're talking over 20 years ago now. And to this day, his is still the most popular shoe line. The impact that his shoe line, as well as his apparel, and then just the guy has had on culture today. And we're talking about a generation that, attention span is, 5 minutes, if that. But even kids and, young adults that didn't see him play at his peak still identify with him and still rock with him. What is it about the impact of the Air Jordan, really just the line, particularly the shoes, that makes them still have such an impact today?
Well, a lot of that has to do with the fact that, you know, when it comes to fashion and culture in general, hip hop and black culture has always driven the trends around the world. So, with basketball and hip hop being so intertwined since their inception, Jordan always bridged that gap further because you had rappers wearing his shoes, which trickled down to dope boys and kids in the neighborhood. And then you had the rich white guy who loves sports and wants to feel cool and exclusive buying the shoes. I mean, if you ever watch Seinfeld, Jerry's shoe game was ridiculous. In
Hmm.
every episode, he had a pair of either like J's, he had some Bo Jacksons on, some Andre Agassi's, but he had like all the J's. And those were his real shoes. It wasn't anything that was provided by wardrobe. Um, and of course, some of it, the impact happens on accident. You think about like Nike SB. That was born out of the fact that the Jordan 1 was such a hit that Nike overproduced them. And because they overproduced them, the extra pairs ended up getting sent to outlets discounted from the original $65 to $20. So then you got skaters who they don't really care about basketball. They're looking for a new shoe because with good grip, and then they pick up these Jordan 1s at Sears, and then they end up loving them. And then now they're more interested in Nike in general, as well as who's this Michael Jordan guy? Does he have any other shoes that are dope? And then once all that kind of happens, the impact of the shoe just keeps spreading and spreading. So it's just one of those things where you get people interested all across because of the design of the shoe and then the play of the man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key thing from that I take away from it is Jordan has continued to have his line still be not only relevant but still dominant well after his playing career. I think he's up to what, 34 now. I think that, yeah, the Air Jordan
Yep,
34,
34.
yeah, are the latest models. And but the reality is, for most people, the retros are what they go after. I don't even think there was a retro shoe market before. Right, was it right around 2000, 2001 when they initially started doing retro releases?
Oh, it was before that.
Mm,
That's when they took off because the first run of retros just sat, and that's really sad to think about
really?
because yeah, it was back in '94 when he retired. They brought back in honor of his retirement. They started bringing back the early models, and these are some of the most true to the OG models because they still had the designs and everything for creating the shoe. So like, you think about it now, people get all excited because oh, this Jordan 1 is closer to the original release or this Jordan is closer. Like you think about, what is it? After the 2000s, they took off the Nike Air, it had Jumpman Air. And then people got really excited when the Nike Air came back on the threes, fours, and fives, sixes. But like these models that originally released back then had the Nike Airs, had all the stuff that people go crazy about now, and they ended up in outlets, So it's funny that I don't really know what triggered it. I think it was just I don't know. I think it was just some of the nostalgia from us growing up because I guess we were still too young in at that time to understand. To us that's just the old Jordan. I remember being a kid. I remember cats have you might have a pair of J's, and then when the next J come out, nobody's really cares about your J's anymore. You got the old J's. You know,
Mm.
like I remember walking around with my sixes and sevens on back in the day, and because they were still fresh because I took good care of my shoes, and then cats were wearing the eights and the nines, and they were like, "Oh, Curtis got them old J's on," almost as an insult.
Mm.
But then it came, like you said, it came back around in the 2000s where, I guess at that point, just people really understood. And because the legacy was cemented, and that's when it was like, oh man, I remember those. I'd missed out on them when I was a kid. Let's get them now. And then it just went crazy from there.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, and I'm glad you brought that up because I did not know that. That is, wow. So they were sitting for a while. Can you imagine today having retro, particularly as far as, the craftsmanship and the material being close to the OGs and walking into a mall and seeing those sitting? I can't even, I can't even wrap my brain around something like that. I mean, you can't imagine that now.
Right. Because
I,
now even the most ridiculous colorways that have no business selling out are selling out, and then increasing in value. So
I wonder if those last 3 years where he truly separated, I think rings 4 through 6 truly separated Jordan. Like after 93, after beating Sir Charles, you can have a debate, but there were people that could still say Magic. They could still say Larry. The OGs can, bring up the Bill Russells of the world. I think 96 through 98 and what he did, revenge season in 96, obviously flu game, 97 and then 98, being pushed to the limit and just finding a way, game 6, Utah, last shot. I think when we talked about earlier moments, I believe moments like that just cemented him as the GOAT in most people's eyes. And I think it just added to the appreciation that we have for him. And I think in 98, we knew, okay, this is probably, it. I believe in 93, we were like, okay, maybe he's just burned out. We knew the unfortunate tragedy of James Jordan, his father, and we know how close they were. So we thought maybe he was just burnt out, but he would come back. I think after 98, we knew this was it. That combined with the extra moments that he provided those last 3 years, separating himself from just about everybody else at that point. Only LeBron James has really come close since. And I know my Kobe stands, I'll go ahead and throw his name out there too. Um, but I think those moments, matter. So By the time you got to the point where you were like, okay, these retros are coming out, and now I want to, zero in on a select few. What were give the audience out there a few examples of some retros that you didn't get at the time, and when you realized they were finally coming back around, Curtis, you was like, hey, gotta have them.
The biggest one will probably be the ones that just dropped this year, which are the Flint 13s.
Mm.
When the 13s first dropped, I remember seeing them. Of course, he got game, and I remember a cat wearing them at school, and I just really didn't care for them at first. The design of them, it was too out there for me. Like, I just didn't get it. Like the pods, it reminded me like of an elephant's foot, and then like the top portion with this way, it looked kind of like it just was weird, man. I wasn't feeling it. But over time, especially one thing with retros and just the shoes in general, sometimes all it takes is the colorway. Where the design it has a strong design, but the colorway is what really sets it off. And when I saw the playoff version, the all black ones, I really liked those. Then of course the bread ones were cool. But my thing is, even though I was a Mike fan, red was never my favorite color. You
Mm.
know, so I was always a bigger fan of shoes that had blue in it. Now, in the past, there was always at least one or two Jordans that had blue, or they were, was mostly black or something to where you could wear it with other stuff. It didn't have a whole lot of red. But when, like I said, when those flints dropped, that that blue and that gray upper, it was just great, man. I gotta remember this one cat Floyd, because it's back when shoes came out on Tuesday. He left midday to go get his pair. He come back unboxing them on the stoop at school. And it was just like I was like, man, those things look incredible. And I was so happy because, like I said, I didn't get them then, and then when they came back out a few years later, I missed out on them. So having them finally return after so long, and then actually return in a really strong retro, was really good to have. So those are a favorite of mine. The Columbia 14s. I mean, not Columbia 14s. The Columbia 11s from 2014.
Mm.
That's a pair that I was really excited to get. Um, and I'm honestly hoping for another pair that's more true to the OG with the higher cut patent leather, but just because again, just like the 13s, the 11s were a Jordan that while now it's one of my favorites, when it originally dropped, I didn't love it. I remember seeing Mike doing the interview, or Hamad Rashad doing the sideline interview wearing them, talking about the new Jordan back when Mike had he's wearing 45 playing Orlando, and then they were talking about how they were going to get he was going to get fined again, similar to with the Breads, for because the shoes didn't match the uniform. And I remember like Boys to Men wearing them, and it was something weird about, because we had never seen patent leather on a basketball shoe.
No.
Like, what is the patent leather? Something you have on dress shoes? Like, why is it on basketball shoes? And you hear Mike say, I want a shoe that I can wear from the basketball court to the business office. So it's like, oh, okay. And then you actually started seeing cats doing that. You saw Boys to Men wearing them when they performed, and you saw people going to red carpet events wearing them J's, instead of dress shoes. I mean, shoot, and I did eventually fall in love with them. That was supposed to be a shoe I was gonna get married in. Um, but when, like I said, those Columbias dropped, because being from North Carolina, UNC's always been my favorite college team. And then just that white patent leather, that white upper, the small Carolina blue, or as they call it, Columbia blue accents. I mean, it just was amazing. So then being able to get the release that came out a few years ago, um, really hyped about those.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I remember. I'm glad you brought those up. I remember two things that stood out to me as a kid about those Columbia 11s. It was Mike Revenge season '96 when he broke them out. Really, that one time, I think that entire season, but an All Star game.
Right.
And I maintain that the jerseys for that particular All Star game is, among my favorites as well. And then Fresh Prince, Will Smith, man, when the series finale, the final show ever, and everybody else had kind of cleared out, and Will took a moment to himself, and he was just standing there. And I said, okay, though, what's going on? And I looked down, and he had those Columbia 11s on, man. So definitely a fan favorite. For me, and it probably always will be, the number one Jordan retro that I didn't get at the time, that I missed out on it, I think a handful of times, was the infrared 6, the all black with the red peeking out of there every now and then. Um, the Jordan 6, and we'll talk about this later on, is not one of my top 4 Jordans of all time today. But the first time I saw them, it was the first time, and it was game 2 when he just went off. He made like 13 shots in a row. I'm a little kid watching NBA Finals. I'm thinking he's not beating Magic Johnson. He has to learn how to win first, because that was kind of a thing in the NBA. Like you got there, but then you had to lose. We saw Detroit, and Isaiah lose. We saw really Magic was the only one, and Larry, they came in and won. But for the most part, you kind of had to lose before you won. So I was pulling for him, and obviously he was in his 7th season at that point. So it wasn't like as great of a player as he was. He didn't win immediately. So there was starting to be questions like, okay, is he another George Gervin? Is he another Dominique Wilkins? Meaning he's a showman, but not necessarily a winner. So I was paying attention to those finals as much as you could when you're 6 years old. And just, wide eyed and just looking, and I'm seeing, oh, a spectacular move, Marv Albert doing his thing. And I'm watching these 6s. And that was the first shoe that I had to have. And I knew I wasn't going to get them at that time. There was no way I was going to get my mom to put 125. And that's right. At the time, those shoes were, I believe, 125, which, now when you look at these shoes going for 190, somewhere between 190 and 220, you can imagine 125, how crazy that was back then. But I knew I wasn't going to get them, but I had them on my radar. It was tattooed on my brain as a kid. And it wasn't until they've dropped that particular retro a handful of times, but I believe it was 2014 when they dropped them. And I told myself, like, point blank, period, I'm getting them. And I got them. And as you mentioned before, if you want to be nitpicky, you can point out some things where it's like, okay, it's not quite the original, but I did like the quality on the 2014 versions. I think the quality on the 2014 versions was actually better than what I saw from the joints that came out last year in 2019, slightly in my opinion. But anyway, just something about that shoe. It was the first shoe that I had to have. It was my first, like, oh man, I really, really want these, got to have these. And I was able to make that happen. Another example is, matter of fact, I'll save that one. Another example would be the Space Jam 11. They finally came out with those about 4 years ago. I missed them when they dropped. I think it was back in 2000. Then I missed the joints that dropped in 2009. And I was like, okay, this shoe is not going to come out again, and I don't get them. So getting those, and they're called Space Jams, even though they're technically not. I mean, we can get into that here in a moment. But really love the craftsmanship on those. Really love those, and it was just like a situation where you're talking, 15 plus years between me really wanting to get them and having a chance to get them and not getting them, and finally making it happen. So I would say definitely, both of those, and there's a personal attachment to both of those shoes beyond them just being, dope models for me. The infrared 6s when he won his first ring, and then the Space Jam, or if you want to call them that, revenge season, 11s that with that blue and that black, which is not a colorway you see too often on any of the Jordans. So those definitely stood out. Now, you know what? Let's go ahead and get into it, man. This is what I was looking forward to. Your top 3. Now, and I know this is tough, and I know it was tough for me, but if you could only pick your top 3 Air Jordan models ever, what would they be and why?
All right, so with this question, for a long time I had one answer, and then as I started looking at my shoe collection, I realized that that answer couldn't be correct because I had way more pairs of another version. So my answer now would be the 11s, the 1s, and the 6s.
Mm.
Where previously the 1s would have been replaced with the 3s. But I started looking at my collection, and when I got like 10, 12, 11 pairs of ones compared to maybe I think I got like 6 or 7 pairs of threes, I was like, whoa, maybe the ones are actually the ones I like better. But yeah, those three are the ones that I love. Like I said, starting with the sixes. The sixes are my favorite Jordan from like the earliest years. Um, that's the one he won his first title in. I love the design of the shoe from the heel tab to the tongue grips, the way the shoe is designed after his Porsche that he had back in the day. Um, I love those elements, the color blocking, because there's a lot of great colorways for the shoe, from the carmines to the infrareds, the sport blue, the maroons, shoot, the PSGs that came out a few years ago. Like, there's so much you could do with that shoe in terms of the blocking, and they've come out with so many just classic colorways that it's a shoe that it doesn't get as much exposure as some of the other ones, but to me, it's just as timeless as any of them. The Jordan 11, of course, like I said, it grew on me. Um, but once I fell in love with it, it was a done deal. Like I love the way it looks. I love the whether it's the mid top, the low top to the low top, the IE versions. I love all of it. That outsole, the way it's designed, the shape of it, the midsole, the carbon fiber on it, everything about it just stands out to me, and it just looks phenomenal. And it's just a favorite of mine. I can you can dress it up, you can dress it down. There's nothing it doesn't look good with, in my opinion. And then of course the Jordan ones, which, like I said, a lot of the same things I've said about all the other ones still apply. A lot of great colorways are still coming out with great colorways. The paneling of the shoe just allows for a lot of cool designs. The different materials that they've done with it, from the Flyknit, which I love because they're super lightweight, to of course, the leather and suede. There's just so much they've done with the shoe, and it's just a classic shoe. Like, it's truly becoming um, similar to the way people would like wear Converse, where it's just a classic. And I hope Nike really embraces that. And it seems like they're doing it, especially with the Jordan 1 mids. There's a ton of mids out there that I know, quote unquote, hype beasts and stuff, and some of them, some sneakerheads don't like them because they're like, oh, it's a mid. But you guess what? Jordan loves them. He loves mids, and
Right.
that's why they keep making them. The mids be selling. So you know, I just hope that they continue with the line and just continue with the dope colorways.
Absolutely, man. You definitely just dropped three classics, and you already know I've mentioned it briefly earlier how I feel about the sixes. So definitely honorable mention to the Air Jordan 6. For me, and these three models have never changed once they each came out, and they probably never will. Number three, the Air Jordan 12. And as I mentioned previously, it wasn't a shoe that immediately grabbed me. It was just watching him that season and the moments, and we talked about that earlier. The moments that he had that year. Obviously, the bread colorway, which is they're calling them flu games now. After the game he had when he dropped 38 on them to really turn that series around in the finals against the Jazz. The bread colorway, I think, is arguably my favorite colorway, period, amongst all Jordan models. But just watching him and how he operated in the flu game. I mentioned the con man game against the Knicks when he dropped 51. My favorite Jordan game of all time to watch, point blank, period, was the playoffs, round one, game two, against the Washington. They were called the Bullets at the time before they switched over to the Wizards. They had a young Juwan Howard and Chris Webber, highly underrated point guard, in my opinion, Rod Strickland. They had a squad. They had a young squad that was up and coming at that time. And again, we talk about the fundamentals and just understanding the game of basketball more than just being an athlete. He fundamentally destroyed them, and every one of his 55 that he dropped was important because it was a close game throughout. I love that game of his. It's my favorite game to watch. And he had the playoff 12s on. So it's just all the moments that he had in my favorite season to watch him came in those Air Jordan 12s, and they have grown on me since then to become one of my favorite, model silhouettes of all time. So Air Jordan 12, shout out to that. That's my number three. Number two would be the Air Jordan 11. You mentioned it earlier. You can dress it up, dress it down. It is arguably the most, I would say it's arguably the most versatile gym shoe, technically gym shoe ever made to this day, in my opinion. I believe you talked about the carbon fiber and just sort of the patent leather and everything that they had introduced in that model, which has been used as an influence for other sneakers ever since. That shoe was revolutionary. Tinker Hatfield, he talked about this in the Driven from Within. I highly recommend that book. It's a Michael Jordan book. He talked about how at Nike, when Jordan first retired, that they were saying, okay, we had a great run. Let's just go ahead and, move on. And Tinker didn't want to do it. He felt like Jordan, what he had done, that the shoe line could survive even if he was not actively playing. The execs at Nike, I believe, including Phil Knight, said that's crazy. If he's not playing, why would people buy the shoe? They identified the shoe really with how he's playing. And Tinker stuck to his guns, and he was determined to make, in his mind, he said Mike had been bugging him for years anyway for like a flashier, more versatile, shoe. So just he was, with all of that, weighing on him, Tinker went in the lab and he created a shoe that's probably the most beloved, maybe the most famous single basketball shoe ever made. For me personally, watching him, that was revenge season after he came back briefly in '95, and young Penny and young Shaq, gave him that work, kicked him out of the playoffs. It did happen. The NBA cannot burn the tapes. We saw it. um, he came back in '96, 72-10, arguably the best team, single season team I've ever seen. Either the '96 Bulls or the '01 Lakers are my two favorite or best teams of all time. We'll have that debate another time, but just everything about that shoe, the versatility. I love that shoe, always will. It's a timeless classic, man. And my number one Air Jordan of all time, the Air Jordan 13. And it's interesting because I know earlier you had mentioned that when you first saw them, you were like, "What is going on here?" Like, and it eventually they grew on you. For me, it was the polar opposite. The first time I saw them was actually before the season started, and I believe the Bulls had went over to Europe and they played in this like exhibition tournament over in Paris, if I'm not mistaken. And he was coming out in his warm ups, and he took the warm ups off as far as the sweat bottoms. And that was the first time I saw him. Period. Because back then you didn't have internet where you were getting previews to get an idea of what a shoe would look like. You pretty much saw him for the first time when the players came out. And I remember looking at those and going, I don't know what's going on here, but I love it. I love every bit of it. And then when I saw sometime later he got game with Denzel and Ray Allen, and the way Denzel was rocking them, and I just fell in love with that shoe. And my favorite single shoe, regardless, like not just model but colorway, is the Air Jordan Playoff 13. I love that shoe. I loved it from the first time he wore him, game one against the Nets in '98. That's over 20 years ago, and I can still vividly remember seeing those for the first time. And I was just like, wow, wow. Love that shoe. Had to have it. Was literally working at a Chuck E. Cheese at the time as a teenager. I occasionally got in that in that actual suit as Chucky, and I did whatever I had to do to earn the money to get those shoes. And I held on to them for years, and then they was finally I had worn them so many times on the court by like '03, '04, they were unwearable. But I didn't care. I rocked them until they were literally unwearable. And that shoe, when they did a retro, I believe about 10 years ago, it's the only time I think they've retroed that particular colorway of that model. Was
Yeah,
the
that one hasn't been back for a while, so that's like I said, that's the one I really love too. So I'm hoping it comes back soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So am I. And I know as soon as they come back out, I'm getting them so I can, finally have them back, back in my collection. So good stuff, man. And one thing I do want to do is obviously we've been talking Air Jordan and the impact of the Jordan, particularly on the shoes and everything like that, just on the court, off the court, the culture, everything. But we've also had throughout the years other signature shoe models that have, dropped over the years. I'm looking over your shoulder there. I'm seeing the Griffies. I'm seeing the pennies. I'm seeing, a little bit of everything, man. I'm actually getting a little jealous right now. It's pretty dope. But and you touched on like Dame earlier. There have been some other signature series from other athletes that have definitely, had their impact over the years. Let's go ahead and give some of them love, man. Like, what are some of your favorites that are non-Jordans that have dropped throughout the years?
Well, of course, Penny was my dude back in the day, so I loved his line. I mean, and it's still. I mean, it's not going as strong as I would like because but it's starting. It seems like it's starting to come around. Like foams have stayed popular, which has been wonderful because I love foams. I remember when the first time they dropped. Funny thing with the foams is they were actually designed for Scottie Pippen,
Mm.
and Scottie Pippen didn't like them. He thought it looked like a space shoe, And then Penny saw him, he was like, "Yo, what is this?" And it's like, "I want this to be my next shoe." And the funny thing is, he didn't even debut him. Mike Bibby did in March Madness.
Wow.
Uh, but yeah, like the foams, or just the Penny line in general, from the Penny ones, classic Penny two, the Penny three, like those shoes have a special place, and they just came out some Penny sixes that I really like. I'm gonna try to pick them up when I get a chance. Um, of course, the LeBron line. Now, LeBron, because LeBron is polarizing in a lot of ways, especially people who are fearful of him ascending.
Mm.
His line gets a lot of undeserved hate. But he's had a lot of strong models in his line, especially if you go back and look at him. And the retro market for LeBrons is really starting to heat up now, similar to Mike. So, like, every time a retro LeBron drops, that thing is selling out instantly. I think about the Media Day LeBron 7s that came out with a few months ago that had the one purple shoe and the one gold shoe. Like those things were so fire and they sold out everywhere immediately.
Right.
Um, LeBron's got a lot of stuff, and the thing about LeBron's line is it's always been Nike's performance line. So there was a stretch in the middle, probably around from the 11s to the LeBron 13s, where they weren't the most like wearable shoe out in the streets. I mean, you can wear them in the streets, but they were designed as basketball courts. Their price reflected them being basketball courts. They had all the state of the art technology, so they were the most expensive shoes out there. And you know, now Nike's finding a balance. It seems where they're able to incorporate new techs like they had the Battle Knit a few years ago with the LeBron 15s. They have the Knit Posit now with the LeBron 17s, where they're able to incorporate that new technology, but also make a shoe that's more fashionable, that can be worn, that has a lot of dope colorways. Um, you know, Another line, of course, Allen Iverson with the question line and the answer. I like some of the early models better than the later models, but like a lot of it just has to do with like these guys. Unfortunately, some of the other guys they didn't have the careers, or not to say they didn't have the careers, because they had strong careers, but there's a difference between having like a great career and a legendary career.
Mm.
you know and the guys that have legendary careers are the ones where they are here longer, and their footprint exists longer to affect more things. So Iverson had a really good career. He's a Hall of Famer. But if I ask you about the later Iverson models, you probably don't even remember what they look like. Of course, we remember the early ones because those are the ones where he had those moments. Same thing with Penny. We remember the early models up to the phones, but then he had injuries. Same thing with Griffey's. Everybody remembers the early models, the Griffey 1 and the Griffey 2. But if I ask you about the later Griffey's, you probably don't remember them. Same thing with Vince Carter. We mentioned the dunk contest earlier. Where he was in Pumas, if I remember correctly, or was he in Pumas, or was he in And1s? I can't even remember now, which is
Was
funny
that
because
one, or did he switch over to Nike at that point?
he hadn't switched over to Nike yet.
Okay.
He switched over to Nike after the dunk contest. I'm pretty sure he was wearing some Pumas.
Mm.
Or was it the N1? I can't even remember because
Wow.
I mean, he had a lot of great dunks in both of them. So they're both in my head right now. But all I remember, the main thing I remember thinking back then was like, I can't wait till he switches brands.
Yeah.
And and then like we think about the Nike Shock, the BB4 that he wore, and that commercial where he was jumping over Gary Payton in the Afro wig. It was
Mm.
fantastic commercial, fantastic shoe. And then even like the early his first official signature shoe when he had the commercial where he showed up at Rucker Park, and took over the game. Like he had a few pieces of heat after that, but because of injuries, because he didn't have those moments, those shoes fade away from memory. So my thing is there's a lot of good stuff out there with a lot of people. We talked about Dame. Harden's got some pretty nice some of Adidas in his line. I don't know if I could have signed with Adidas because it's funny thing about Harden. Like Harden was a huge Nike and Jordan guy. And then I know Adidas gave him that money, but did not be able to wear any J's or any Nikes
And
anymore.
that
No, I don't
matters.
know if I could do it, man. And then of course Kobe, like, you think about Kobe's early line with Adidas. They really with the feet you wear, they really tried to have a lot of great technology. And then eventually when he came over to Nike, and he had that epic sneaker free agency for that season where he was just rocking everything, and he had all the dope colorways. Like Nike had made the special Jordans for him. Back then, he had the special questions in the Laker colorway. He was out there wearing Converse weapons. I mean, he was out there wearing everything, and
Everything.
just to try to see what he wanted to do. And rest in peace to him. He had a lot of great stuff that came out in his line. Um, my favorites are probably the Kobe 9s and the Kobe 11s of his line, and then of course the unofficial shoe, the was it the Hyper Dunk? When
Yeah.
he came out with those with the driving the DeLorean and the Back to the Future colorway. Um, so those are some of my favorite things. Just like even the Jordan line. Jordan line has continued on. A lot of people, they're in the mindset where if they're like I only wear what he played in, which isn't even official because they stick to 1 through 14. I mean, he played in more than 1 through 14, and whether it's the IE11s he played in those, whether it's some of the other cuts of shoes. Like that's the funny thing because we didn't have HD back then. There's a lot of shoes he wore that we weren't even aware of. Like I think about like the low top 13s. He wore some low top ones in the playoffs. He wore some low top 11s against the bread version against the the Sonics. He wore the dirty, as they call them, the dirty bread 13s. There was a lot of stuff out there that he wore that we didn't even realize because you couldn't really tell on the small screen. Um, but like I said, the Jordan models after 14, there's some heat in there. Whether it's the stuff he wore with the Wizards, whether it's the stuff that came out, post his definite retirement and after they did the 23, which was supposed to have been the end of the line. But like especially like some of the new remixes they've been doing since they hit 30, with the remix version of the ones, the twos, and the threes, and even the fours. I think those have been really strong. They've been really great performance shoes, and like I said, I'm excited to see what they're gonna do. If they're gonna keep doing the remixes of them, because there's been some talk that they're gonna get away from that. I hope that they do continue it because I think it's cool to bring the the classic technology and classic designs up to the standards of today and the way we see the world and the way we see things. That's one of the reasons why I love the fact that Nike is going in the vault and bringing back some of the shoes that Tinker designed or the early prototypes of shoes. They had the Tinker threes that came out a few years or this past year, and so where they added the swoosh back to them. You think about, I can't think what the shoe's called now. It's gonna come to me as soon as we finish. But it was like the early prototype of the 13 where it had the strap on it. They brought those back. You
Mm.
know, there's rumors that they're gonna bring back, because the original 11s had a special collar up top where it was almost like a booty. They're talking about they might bring those back. So, I really want to see what they do. I would love to see like a remix of the sixes, you know, and what they do with that, and I just want to see what they do going forward.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And yeah, good stuff there. And my personal favorite, as far as the post playing career Jordan model, was the 29. I loved the Air Jordan 29 for sure. Now, on that note, man, this has been great, man. I'm glad we were able to do this, and want to thank you, for coming through Champions Material. Um, I want to make sure that we have a moment to discuss everything that's going on with Stay Copping Kicks. I love what you have done there, building that from the ground up. I'm looking at your collection behind you, and I know, not too long ago, I saw you doing unboxing and just sort of like how you break down not only just the shoe from a if you like it or not, but you really kind of break down the craftsmanship, the material, things that you don't necessarily think about, but they absolutely matter, particularly when it comes to the longevity of a shoe, man. So just take a moment to, let the audience know everything that's going on with Stay Copping Kicks.
Well, Stay Copping Kicks is the brand that I created, and the idea behind it is, Stay Copping Kicks, but it's more about, what you truly love about sneakers. We talked about the moments, we talked about the feelings that are associated with certain shoes. And we talked about that history. And that's a piece that's missing a lot of times. You get people, especially now because of hype beasts, and they're like, oh, it's a Jordan 1, you got to have it. Oh, it's a Jordan whatever, you got to have it. So you got kids out there who are wanting these shoes. And a lot of them don't even know the significance of it. So, I want them to have that knowledge of why this shoe is important, why was it hot, why is this colorway a big deal, and why you should care more than the fact that somebody just said this is a dope shoe, because there's a lot of shoes. You ain't got to just wear Nikes, you ain't got to wear just Jordans. I always say, if you like it, I love it. Wear what you like, forget the hype. So that's what Stay Copping Kicks is about, making sure that people are informed and know about just any and all things shoe related, and can just learn to love what they love.
Absolutely, man. That's good stuff, man. And I'm glad you broke it down that way. Adds a lot of context. Now, before we get up out of here, for the people out there, where can they find all things Stay Copping Kicks?
Well, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Stay Copping Kicks. Also, you can follow my personal account is That Dude Curtis on Twitter, and That Dude Curtis 6 on Instagram. On all the accounts, I post a lot of different pictures of sneakers and sneaker news and just things that are going on. So if you want to stay informed with me, I'd love to have you follow me.
Absolutely, man. And that is That Dude Curtis Harvey. Definitely look him up. Stay Copping Kicks. All things, in and out of the shoe game, as far as, breaking down, not only just the things that you see on the outside, but what really matters on the inside. On that note, I want to thank you, the audience, for taking the time to join us here today on Champions Material. As always, myself and Curtis, we hope that we gave you some positive energy, going down memory lane, all things Air Jordan. Hopefully, we provided some good memories for you as well. And do you agree? We gave you our top 3 Air Jordans of all time, Air Jordan retros at least. What are yours? Shoot any feedback over to champions.materialsv@gmail.com. Beyond that, as always, everybody be safe, continue to hold it down, and never forget, whoever you want to be and whatever you want to be, always be the champion of it. That's Champions Material. We'll be back sooner than later with our next episode, but now we're done.